This is Blacklisted Radio. Thank you for tuning in. It's the 26th day of July, 2014. My name is Doug Owen. I'm the senior editor of blacklistednews.com. It's been a while. It's been 2 weeks. We usually do this thing Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Last week, I was on the beach, not in the bunker, monitoring what was happening in the Ukrainian crisis that is unfolding, the civil war, the externality of this proxy war that's playing out has become a focal point now that we have the shooting down of several planes in the Ukraine. People are taking note, and that is what the mainstream media wants you to do because they have solutions, they have sanctions, they have a new plan to make the U.S., NATO, and Europe with this false flag once again relevant. Anyway, you can follow everything that we aggregate on a daily basis for you at blacklistednews.com and on Twitter at BLN Radio. That's my personal handle for the show. Of course, the website dedicated to the show where you can chat with other ambassadors of the broadcast, like Tuna Melts and others hanging out there, is at blacklistedраdio.com. All right, so first off, there's two things I really want to get into. Number one is Gaza, because we have new information. Not that it's going to shock most of my regular listeners, but more ammunition for those that are the Israeli apologists. And it's not to bash just on Israel. I mean, this is a two-part problem, what we have going on today. I think most people can put onto Israeli domestic policy and external policy towards their Palestinian neighbors. How we got to this place has been thousands of years in the making, but ultimately the crisis that's unfolding is so polarizing because the Palestinians are really, in a David versus Goliath situation. They just, there was this donkey false flag Trojan horse that we talked about on Doomcast this Wednesday that Benjamin Netanyahu was using as justification for the direct targeting of civilians, children, UN, schools, hospitals, TV stations. We can go on. And the disgusting policies and just dehumanization campaign that he and his Likud party fellows are engaging in. But the ridiculousness of it, and the one thing that you should be taking away from that story, and if you haven't seen it, it's at blacklistednews.com. It's worth 13 seconds of your life to look at how disproportionately outmanned and outplayed the Palestinians, even the Hamas terrorists and others that wish to do the Israeli children harm. And I mean, even the rhetoric is losing its power. And I think that's one of the problems with all the war that we see in this summer of rage, is that ultimately people just don't respond. The American public is so shell-shocked from daily terror and shootings and the overhyping by the media of the reality that is so missed, and that is that most of these things are not going to affect you, and the chance that you are going to be killed by a terrorist, there's so many more mundane things that could happen to you that are worthy of worry. Not even worthy of worry, but just would be more worrisome if you were going to put it in a logical frame of mind. They don't want any of that. And if you're using donkeys as Trojan horses, then obviously the Palestinians have no fighting chance in this. And, well, we have new information. Not that it's going to surprise most of you, but New York Magazine, obviously run by anti-Semites, and I say that jokingly because they have reported that, you remember the 3 Israeli teenagers that were kidnapped in the West Bank? That Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said ultimately Hamas was responsible, Hamas would pay, quote, end quote. Well, all of that was BS. It was not Hamas, had nothing to do with Hamas, and The New York Rag here actually put out some great, I think, analysis. Quote, repeated inconsistencies in Israeli descriptions of the situation have sparked debate over whether Israel wanted to provoke Hamas into a confrontation. Israeli intelligence is also said to have known that the boys were dead shortly after they disappeared, but have maintained public optimism about their safe return to beef up support for the Jewish diaspora. Absolutely. You know they're dead. There's no chance of saving these Israeli teenagers. Whether or not they were kidnapped by Hamas becomes a non-issue because they already have everything that they want in place, the media campaign. And if it wasn't this, it would have been something else. And I would even go farther to say that because they absolutely knew that this was fake, they were creating a narrative to justify international terrorism, war crimes. And that's according to the UN. I mean, and if you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you know how little I put most of their consensus agreements or comments in, and that is in a very agenda-driven way. And so I think that there's a bigger story here. But this is what gets brushed to the side, the fact that everything that this new war, was predicated upon was a lie. And they went forward with, what's this operation? Operation Brother's Keeper. You gotta love it. If you like propaganda and you like dissecting it, the one thing that you should do is look at the self-righteous religious dogma that Israel attaches, and the U.S. for that matter, attaches to these different killing sessions. So a little bloodletting there. Also, the UAE may be getting thrown under the bridge by the Israelis. This could be, a little COINTELPRO, but I think it's interesting. UAE offered to fund Israel's Gaza offensive. Now, we know the UAE has problems with its autocratic government keeping its people under wraps, and they want blue jeans, rock and roll, and they want Western lifestyles. They want you have a lot of people that are educated, and these countries are all in a huge quagmire because if you want to remain relevant, and this is for your military as well, you have to embrace technology. You have to have that kind of research development, and you have to have a certain amount of people participating in that system. If you're not relevant, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're seeing that here in this country in a microcosm with the 10th Amendment Center and other initiatives for nullification. If you're not relevant, the government's not relevant, your dollar is losing relevance, there's going to be things like Bitcoin. There's going to be alternatives that are going to be created. And that's what the U.S. government is doing right now. And they're trying to help their partner that's doing the same thing, and that is Israel, stamp out all of these fires. They're trying to stop technology. Same thing for the UAE. They're trying to maintain power and maintain this vacuum. And we're seeing that in North Korea, the Hermetic Kingdom. Governments trying to keep their people off of the internet. China making concessions, but still trying to use the iron fist to control people. And that's only going to last for, I think, another few decades at the most. And maybe I'm overly optimistic, but you have to have a new game. Israel's losing that. But this is interesting. The UAE's in the same kind of position. Horrible records on human rights. And they have, on many occasions, worked very closely with the Israelis and Mossad to assassinate Hamas targets. So they are playing ball. And I guess if you want to remain relevant and you want to, get Donald Trump's super pyramids built and super buildings and all the stuff that they're building in the UAE, which is becoming one of the havens for the elite, one of the different places they are building quote-unquote flats, though it's kind of metaphoric because so much of that stuff is just glitter, glam, and it's falling apart because of bad engineering. Same thing with the Chinese economy. When you look at these apartment buildings, they're just falling over because of being too cheap, not really a lot of foresight, not caring enough about the longevity, rather than just the project and everybody, putting some peanuts in their pockets before the building collapses. That's the short-term thinking, but it becomes more metaphoric for so many of the other things. So, is this story here real? Is it just Channel 2 in Hebrew, the leading Israeli national TV station, their government propaganda station, getting the message out to the youth that are pretty disenfranchised and probably not that thrilled to be living in a war zone? That's why Israel has a big problem. So does the U.S. in that regard, and that is maintaining relevance and keeping people interested in perpetual conflict that does not benefit them. And that's where the most of the Israeli youth are at today, being forced to fight into a compulsory system against Palestinians, against neighbors, against even ethnic brothers and sisters. And sooner or later, that kind of runs its course. But the UAE may have... and when you look into the backstory, I think a lot of this has to do with the Leviathan gas and oil fields and some of the deals that they have tanked in the last few years. I'm not sure if it's the Tapi or the Baku that's going through the UAE. But anyway, nonetheless, I mean, they're one of the GCC states that is friendly with Jordan and with the U.S., they are, this comes from the peninsula. The UAE knew in advance of Israel's plans for an offensive in Gaza and even offered to fund the operation, provided the militant Palestinian outfit Hamas was eliminated in the process, Israel's Channel 2 claimed. So is it too shocking to think that they would want to eliminate Hamas? Because even if you really do want, I think, peace in Palestine and a real two-state solution, if that's possible, Hamas is a huge problem because they are the Mossad. They are being at least steered and guided and partially funded and have, I think, deep infiltration by the Israeli intelligence agencies, Mossad and maybe others, private contractors, and other agencies, including the U.S. FBI and on, that are inside of Hamas. It would only stand to reason. Why wouldn't they? I mean, if you want real intelligence on the ground and they're spending, in the aggregate, trillions of dollars in this war on terror, you would think that they would at least have a couple guys that are inside of Hamas. They're like, hey, guys, we need to fire up some more rockets, and if you got a connection to Iran where we can get some more and get a PowerPoint presentation for the UN Security Council, let's get that thing going. I mean, that it's just beneficial to the business plan. I don't think that I don't think it's a leap to think that that's happening. But, the Israelis do have one big problem, and that is the media itself, which is ironic. Al Jazeera, Gaza offices evacuated after direct hit by Israeli fire. I can tell you that the few mainstream news articles that I have seen or packages on NBC are not painting the Israelis as usual as these great humanitarian defenders. I mean, you still hear the placating, the lip service. Israel has its right to defend itself once again. But, that has lost its luster as well. So when you target the media, when you target the United Nations, you're going to get a lot of anti-Israel sentiment. And we have real high-level American intelligence, counter-terror people that are starting to at least to state the obvious. I'm not a huge fan of Michael Schuer, but he does point this out, and I think it's the elephant in the room. High-level American intelligence has now, there actually is some military intelligence here. Islamic terror is motivated by U.S. support for tyrants in the Middle East and U.S. support for Israel. Makes sense. Makes sense. Not a huge leap here either into conjecture to think that this is mostly bullshit. Most of the stories and narratives and the reasons and justifications for war are just that. Quote, only a fool wouldn't know that our relationship with Israel causes us war with Muslims. In the classic 6th century BC Chinese military strategy treatise, The Art of War, the brilliant military commander Sun Tzu said, it is said that if you know your enemies and know yourself, you will not be imperiled in 100 battles. If you do not know your enemies, but do know yourself, you will win one and lose one. If you do not know your enemies nor yourself, you will be imperiled in every single battle. So apropos. So deep. Not really, but it's true. It's true. If you don't know really why the Muslims, the jihadis hate America, if you don't understand why there's anti-U.S. and anti-Israel sentiment across the world, there's a new piece out, a new poll that proves that, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's only one country, one population that supports what Israel is doing, and that is the U.S. But it's not going to work forever. Even the evangelicals, those people that have usually been huge supporters for the idea of Israel. And we got some great feedback and comments from people and listeners and the Doom Nation and the crew here, really highlighting, I guess, maybe my cavalier approach to what's happening with the Christians and some of the more religious separation and analysis of different belief structures, not understanding why it is that what motivates these different groups nearly is enough, or nearly as much as maybe I should when looking at these justifications. But ultimately, I think that if you believe that you should kill other people to get your way, that that's not okay. And it doesn't matter to me what it is that you try to justify or all the things. And it was really just one of the comments was that there's a difference between the state of Israel and the idea of Israel, in the biblical sense. And what we have today is a faux Israel. It's not. And one of the things I've always thought is odd about Israel is that its name is kind of self-fulfilling. It is real. Is this real? Is this a real state? It is real. That's the name itself when you break it down. And so to defy it, to say that it shouldn't exist, is a contradiction to the actual name. And so people think that it should exist because it says in the Bible that it can exist. Orthodox Jews and other flavors of Judaism disagree on that. I disagree on the policy itself and what it justifies, and the people that use the Bible to justify the creation of nation states. It's like manifest destiny. But I don't necessarily blame people 300 years ago for using religious motivations and justifications, because that was just the way the world was back then. It's like, some of you've got the crazy old racist grandfather, or just that old, maybe not racist, but just somebody who is politically incorrect and very brash, or sees the world in a very different way because of the time that they lived and how things were a friend of mine, I won't name his name, but his great-grandmother, still alive today, is very, very anti-Irish. She's Hungarian. She's very anti-Irish. And it just kind of tickles me that there's still kind of people out there that are holding resentment from 60 years ago. But I don't blame people, and I don't think that you should try to make a mission out of, going and attacking older people for their beliefs. Ultimately, people of that age and of those mindsets, they just go away after a while. It doesn't become relevant. People don't think of the Irish nearly with that negative connotation that they once did. And I'm sure that 100 years from now, some of the people that we consider, I wouldn't say we, but some in this country think are less than desirable to have here, will be part of the grand melting scheme. Not that I support all that multiculturalism stuff, because it's just a big divide rather than looking at what we can do together to fix real core issues in this country. But nonetheless, I mean, we all have these outdated ideas, I think, and one of those is that religion, the blue bloods, the divinity of people gives you the right to treat others as less than human, and to be able to commit crimes based on, the propagation of whatever religion you're part of. It doesn't matter to me. We talk about the nuances, and I'm not that interested in what people's beliefs are, because belief is just that. You believe something. Well, why do you believe it? Well, I read it in a book. Or, okay, well, what else did you do to test that? What else did you do to test that theory? Well, I just always believe that. Well, it's the same thing for my buddy's grandmother. She's always been worried about Irish people, and I'm sure that when she was a young girl, her dad told her horrible fables of what Irish men did. Who knows, But those belief systems are built on years and years and years of mistruths, half-truths, misinterpretations, anger, logical fallacies. So my point is that if you support Israel, you have to be engaging in some of those. You just can't look at this as an unbiased, unfiltered, objective person and say, well, what's happening here is justified. It's okay. So there you go. And targeting the media and blowing it up is not going to help you, Israel. So self-defeating, great piece put out by Danny Schneider, I think his name is, from Consortium News, talking about how U.S. and Israel are pushing the self-destruct button. And it's because of this meme, I guess, that's going on. And this is the U.S. and Israel's foreign policy is not popular. And it's becoming popular to de-dollarize. That's the new swing of the pendulum. Everyone used to want the dollar. Now people are squirming and trying to figure out how to get away from the dollar. And what's happening in the Ukraine is another case in point example as to why you have to be very careful about working with U.S. corporations, the IMF, and others. Interestingly enough, Yatsenyk, he's out. Exit stage left. Criminal, banker, more, worse. Victoria Nuland's buddy, Yats, is exiting stage left. He's no longer the prime minister, financial secretary, whatever he was to the illegitimate, quasi-codified, ridiculous government of thugs that replaced the other government of thugs that the U.S. has installed. The only reason I'm more critical of this government than the last government is because U.S. tax dollars and ultimately the American people's name will be attached to the bloodshed. And because there's unnecessary bloodshed. We have ethnic cleansing because of And that's not hyperbole. We do have an ethnic cleansing that is taking place with the media doing everything it can to look away from. And this is odd. The Gaza conflict is getting more negative press than the pro-U.S. intervention into Ukraine, which is odd. Anyway, I think it's notable. And one of the things that we've talked about in the last 2 podcasts, for sure, is that the truth becomes irrelevant. Who were the snipers in Ukraine? Remember the snipers that were shooting the police officers and protesters? And what happened when Lord Ashton heard from the Estonian Prime Minister that there were questions about the private contractors and other ne'er-do-wells and others that may have done this? And why, of course, would you shoot both sides of a conflict unless you wanted to escalate it to the next level, which did ultimately lead to the oustering of the last guy before the Chocolate King? The truth, nobody really seemed that interested. Same thing with chemical weapons in Syria. I know I'm banging that drum. I know. If you listen to all the podcasts, Doug, you keep banging that Syria drum. My point is that they just keep moving forward. It's an ambushing of generalism. Well, generally, we feel that you'll buy into the fact that we have some unnamed source that led to the justification for what we did. That is the mindset. That is the new plan. It doesn't matter what the truth is. We just keep barraging them, okay? There's a plane that was shot down. Now, let's forget that there was a NATO exercise in Ukraine that coincided with the MH17 shootdown. This is a red flag and an indicator of a complete false flag. Rapid Trident was part of the U.S.-European Command Joint Training Exercise program that went off course, and we have another Malaysian airline that was downed. Now, MH17's fate, and this has become the human drama, ultimately, showing you the visuals of the children's toys and other personal items and passports and other. I know that there's a lot of abnormalities, things that have been pointed out, and some even think that, these are dead bodies that were laid out there from the other Malaysian flight that went missing. And I don't really buy into that because it's so sloppy and would be so hard to do. And at this point, back to the former, the truth as it comes out ultimately doesn't matter because these are short-term media plays, short-term false flags to get a short-term agenda forward. Or you need sanctions, we have a plane that fell down. Whoops. There you go. Now, the whole story has completely fallen apart, and it's based only on conjecture, and you have to, once again, trust the U.S. They've shown us nothing other than social media accounts, YouTube videos, and YouTube has become the new clearinghouse for everything that's true. Of course, Ukrainian, the Kyiv Western installed government immediately blames the Russian separatists, the rebels, for this takedown. So no legitimacy there, no agenda for them to do this. Obviously, wink, wink, of course. So things marred to the point where it doesn't matter what happens. The international coalition to find out, and David Cameron, and you let us get onto the ground and let's find the truth, and we have a child's backpack. I mean, the human tragedy that's happening, that's unfolding in Gaza, that's unfolding in the Ukraine, completely whitewashed by the media. So, big scam. Now, there we go. That's the war report for this week's Blacklisted Radio. I want to talk about the other front, the cyber front. interesting piece Michael Krieger put out that we highlighted here, and we've talked about how the ex-NSA chief, Keith Alexander's making up to $1 million a month being a contractor or a contract employee, a consultant for the Fortune 500s for Wall Street. And who better to know how to manipulate and create money and revenue other than somebody that has all of the inside track, and that's the NSA. I mean, that's what it's really about, the inside track, being ahead of the foe, being able to attack asymmetrically. And I think that, the black and white wars of yesteryear are still imprinted in many people's minds, but really it's about attacking companies, what you see with sanctions, targeting certain groups, certain individuals. Now the U.S. is trying to expand that into attacking the Russian intelligence service agents individually. It's kind of smart, but I think if we lived in 1950, that might matter. People might be offended, but you can probably buy your brand new multi-million-dollar London flat for I don't know how many renminbi or yuan, but you could probably broker that through China. I think that these are ridiculous little ways to chide the Russians ultimately, because when you're super duper uber rich, you have no problem figuring out places to put money. Although, interestingly enough, before we get to the cyber war command here for Wall Street, because that is what this false flag has led to. Interesting note, the Bulgarian banks, where many of the Russian elite and oligarchs hold their money, all of a sudden had bank runs over the last weekend, or last week rather. So kind of interesting there, the economic warfare that goes on. The huge backstory at blacklistednews.com, but just one of the many weapons that the U.S. is using to try to remain relevant, to try to stymie the Russian operators or those aligned with Putin. So, tit for tat, really just, scratching the surface of and really, I think, ultimately making the dollar less relevant. I've said that over and over again. But to this Cyber War Council, because we are in a economic war, and if you Google economic war, you'll find lots of stuff on the internet about using the U.S. dollar as the engine for empire, using OPEC and the petrodollar to force other countries into submission. Same thing with the IMF. Just look at how well they're doing in Greece. Another case in point example of how foreign intervention into microeconomies does not work. Ever, because the people there are just not interested. They care about the bottom dollar. They care about percentage points. They care about those kind of very monochromatic ways to look at humanity. So anyway, Keith Alexander and, of course, the Chertoff group. Anywhere there is more tyranny being instituted and money to be made, Michael Chertoff, the most evil guy out there by the visual metric. By that, I mean he just looks like a skeleton. He's like Skeletor. He's evil looking. You listen to him. He's evil personified. He is the man that ultimately let the bin Laden family escape on September 11, 2001, and helped with the cover-up of the dismantling of the investigation, and did everything that he could to profit himself off of all of those body scanners. The Chertoff group made lots and lots of money. So just like Keith Alexander, other people that were instrumental in war crimes and creating the deep state, this collusion between Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. And he's profited well off of this. So now they're trying to produce this thing they call the Government Industry Cyber War Council. And this is going to, of course, stave off terrorist attacks that could trigger financial panic by temporarily wiping out account balances according to an internal document. So this is a another way to open and deputize Wall Street to the military and to the Pentagon. So anyway, the guy who's pushing this is Keith Alexander. He's the ex-NSA chief. And Mike reported that he's selling the advice there to the Wall Street. I already mentioned that. But I wanted to mention his lobbying group, the Security, Industry, and Financial Markets Association. So it's called SIFMA. And anyway, they've been pitching SIFMA and other trade bank associations to purchase his services through new consulting firms, one of which is IronNet Cybersecurity. And alongside the Chertoff group, he was the same guy that was, he made upwards of, I think, $5 million off the Rapiscan machines. So, it's just another angle to all of this. And this really is the deep state, the ability to control, to attack financial institutions, and be able to go after individuals that the state deems for whatever reason. I mean, it sounds great because we're going after the terrorists that would do us harm. For the most part, the U.S. government hasn't been attacking too many people other than the million or so that are on the terrorist watch list that probably have a lot of problems doing business and the like. But for the most part, they haven't targeted broadly people. We haven't started waking up each and every day and seeing more and more neighbors missing. The Gestapo isn't coming by at night and grabbing people yet. And that is the only difference between what we live in the United States of America and total tyranny, total, Stalinism or whatever, tyrannical regime you could imagine. That's the only thing that we still have. We still have the ability to talk crap and to speak truth to power in this country without too much retribution, unless you're breaking huge CIA documents and putting those out on the web like Edward Snowden, unless you're doing something that is a clearinghouse for secrets. You probably won't be targeted by the state for the most part. Now, they'll probably keep a dossier on you like they do everybody. They're spying on you. But all of this under the guise of keeping you safe. It's why your bank needs to tell the government every penny you make, because your faux pas on the taxes could be a sign that you're a cyber terrorist. Speaking of which, I think it's pretty interesting, and just to note here, some of the other tools that they have, and you can only imagine the new tools that the Cyber War Council would want, considering some of the things that British spies, like at GHCQ, that's the Government Communications Headquarters, and I know most of you know this, it's old news, but the ability that they have had to use this and to keep not only do they have government propaganda that you have to pay for in the British colonies, you still have to manipulate online polls, apparently, according to the Government Communications Headquarters, artificially inflate page view counts on websites, making something seem so much more. The British people resoundingly want to intervene in Iraq. They want to go back in. They want to give billions of dollars to support the Ukrainians. Why? Because BBC has a poll on its website. It works. It does work because those are the talking points. That is what is cited by the media. Look, we got this poll here that says this thing, and that's why we got to give more money and power and freedom to the government. It says it right here on the poll. Look how many YouTube videos views this video got. It has to be that people want us to kill. That's what government uses these tactics, at least a few of them from. Maybe we can say, well, why do we have to take your rights away? Look at this extremist video from the Inspire Club, from Al-Qaeda. Look, it's got 1 million views. Everybody's getting on board. They can hype it up. Right here domestically, we've had some interesting news. The state Supreme Court It's said in Wisconsin that the Milwaukee police, who were caught red-handed alongside many other police departments across the nation, of using Stingray technology. If you haven't heard, we've talked about it a few times, which allows the police to intercept names, phone numbers, location, call records, text messages, and other private cell phone data to locate a murder suspect. Now, that sounds great. We can do that to locate a murder suspect, but what other implications are there? Does that mean that the government does not have to be... Well, number one, they know that it's absolutely illegal to do this, and that's why the FBI instructed and created a manual to give to police departments to deputize them by using this technology, giving them these tools, from the license plate readers to the Stingray technology, and giving them a point-by-point course to lying and denying the existence of this technology. Now, I mean, that obviously points to the illegality of it, the immorality of it, and that it would not only be unpopular, but is more importantly illegal. So, and getting a warrant today, such a joke for the FISA courts, for your kangaroo court, for your local judge, your district attorney. It's easy to get information about you and to get just about anything on you. I mean, the Fourth Amendment's pretty dead, but it's only, I think, through these super invasive measures that they will finally push that pendulum so far that the American public will be upset and will react to this. And so I think most of the faux solutions to these problems with state surveillance and the complete technological panopticon that we have to operate under through the internet, and now the Internet of Things to come. This case in point why, the only thing that you can really do to subvert most of this is just to put the machine down. Put your cell phone down. Take a walk. Leave it behind. Confuse everyone. And you can do that. Oh, speaking of which, a little pie on my face. I didn't turn off my cell phone. I'm getting text messages during the podcast. It's okay. It's not that you have to turn your technology off, but you should be wary of what it is reporting. For the most part, I don't, and this is bad to say, but if the government accidentally kicked down my door, I'd get a lot of money. I'd sue them for millions of dollars. The local police department and every other group that has supported it. So it's not necessarily a bad thing for me, but the police departments, taxpayers, it's a bad thing for you guys out there, because every once in a while you go to the wrong house, you get shot by the occupant, you get trained to treat people like insurgents in your own country, and it changes where you live as well. So it doesn't work for anybody, I think, in the best. But if you did it to me, then I would just get millions of dollars. But it happens to people all the time. So the taxpayers ultimately lose, unless you get killed or permanently, mortally wounded, or decapitated, or lose function. It's probably a good payday for people. And that's how sad it is, right? People just want a payday so bad. They're like, well, and I've thought about this. Talk about the dichotomy. Some of this stuff, like coming home to roost in my mind. I think, man, if I got beat up by a cop, I'd get paid. I'd get $1 million. I'd be able to do more Blacklisted Radio. I wouldn't have to worry about, turning dollars in this economy to keep myself above the water and floating along, just like most people that are trying to dog paddle their way through life. I am part of that. One of the things I do want to throw out there is that I got lots of great feedback, and I truly am sorry about not doing the podcast last week. And I want to thank those that have continued to support the show. If you like uncensored, unmitigated, commercial-free analysis, and you think that what we're doing with not only this show, but with Doomcast and with blacklistednews.com and the aggregation of news to get people on board, understanding the bigger picture and understanding really how that empowers and changes the world that we live in. In a lot of ways, you can support us and others that do this exact thing by making a donation. We do have to buy a new laptop. It's that time where I've been working the last few days. I wanted to do a podcast Monday, but as our producer, Craig, can tell you, I have been working with technology and trying to figure out exactly what it is that we need to get rid of some of the audio artifacts and other issues that we have just with processing and the ability to do all the production. And so we're going to have to buy a laptop, something that's isolated, because we have a lot of hiss and noise coming from the power supply of this PC, the broadcast box. So not to just bore you with technical jargon and things that really don't matter, because to the content of the show, the production does matter, because if it sounds horrible, people will not listen to it. But those are the kind of things that we do invest in, and the tens of hours of time that I put into this show personally, not to mention the constant 20, 30, 40 hours plus each week that we put into just doing aggregation of news and other things. So consider it. If you find value, consider a donation, or help us continue to cognitively infiltrate those out there, the politically aware, those that will listen to the show. Not necessarily your friends and family, but other people on the internet that are already in the know, more likely to respond to the show. Although you can, and we get this every once in a while, Doug, keep it clean. I'm trying to let my 7-year-old listen to the show. I do my best. I really do. But trying to keep a show appropriate for a 7-year-old is very hard to do. Very hard for me to do at this point. I'm trying. I'm getting better, because I realize that everything I say is being listened to by small ears of my family, so of my son. So trying to get cleaner in that regard, but sorry, it's not PG. It is NC-17 or one of those other ridiculous ratings. Calm down. Calm down. Interesting piece that came out of the Washington's blog. You're much more likely to be killed by mundane, boring things rather than terrorism. It's a great piece. I highly recommend you guys check it out, because if you haven't, it does kind of put some of these things in context. I get this all the time on a personal note, and I think that it's great because people consider me to be an optimist, considering how much negative and impactful news that we talk about, and not in a positive way. 90% of what we're talking about has a negative outcome. The fact that people consider me in this community to be an optimist is telling, very much telling. And it's not so much that I'm more optimistic than some. I'm just not nearly as hyperbolic, and I try to put things really into context and look at it historically. If you look at where we're at today in this country, in the United States of America, and I think in the world, we have a lot of great things that are going for us. There's a lot of problems that we have. We have human violence, war. We have the changing. We have the shift in economic dominance. A 50-year cycle is coming to its end, and a 100-year cycle for the dollar is winding up. We're seeing technology shaping so much of who has those dollars and how that's being used to reshape and build a new economy. So those things are very challenging because in one swoop, we want, I think most people listening to the show, we want more accountability. We want a revolution of ideas. We want, by and large, we want culpability for taxation,
I want transparency for taxation, and I want the government to do its job and only its job. Preserve my life and liberty, okay, and protect my property. Those are good things to do. Not, and when we live in a world where multinational corporations happen to be citizens, then you have the U.S. government protecting multinational corporations that have their own militaries these days. But that opens up a whole nother Pandora's box of discussion that, well, we open from time to time. I wanted to talk about we talked about GHCQ, we talked about Stingray, we talked about how the American people are being surveilled. But what we continue to lose, and I think is more and more important, is that the government is being blackmailed, and your Congress is being blackmailed. And this is not new. We can go back to Edgar Hoover. We can go back probably before that, all the way back to the intelligence services in Britain and across the land. Intelligence and spying is always about maintaining status quo, maintaining the calm, docile public that is subservient to the elite, the political elite in whatever country, in whatever time period here on planet Earth you look at. That is what it's always been about, all the way back to tribalism and where we lived in groups of 100 to 50 or less. We've always had the intelligence, the high priest that ultimately had the inside track, and that's what gives people power. That's where knowledge is power really comes from. If you have more power you have more power over your adversary if you understand the weaknesses, if you can blackmail them, if you know who they are sleeping with other than their wife. I mean, you have this huge amount of power over those people. And that's what we continue to forget. So David Chertoff asked U.S. representative, who's a Democrat, Alec Grayson, who every once in a while will give us a little bit of truth. Asked him if the NSA was keeping files on his colleagues. He recounted a meeting between NSA officials and lawmakers in the lead up to a closely contested House vote to better regulate the agency. Quote, one of my colleagues asked the NSA point blank, will you give me a copy of my own record? And the NSA said, no, we won't. They didn't say, no, we don't have one. They said, no, we won't. So that's possible. Now, that's an inference. Out of Washington's blog, just a couple hidden history or memory hold notes to remember for you young bucks and young gals out there. During the Vietnam War, the NSA spied on two prominent politicians amongst many others, but this came out through COINTELPRO. This came out through these declassifications. But then Senator Frank Church and Howard Baker. And Frank Church, he brought us Operation Mockingbird, how the CIA was controlling the media. He also brought us the cancer gun. You can find the review of the cancer gun on YouTube that Frank Church during Senate testimony talked about and brought to the American public, and also Howard Baker, as well as other critics of government, just a few, Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King, and the Washington Post humorist. So there are just countless amounts of points to why the U.S. government wants to control the people. So at any time when they say surveillance is about controlling or keeping you safe, it is an absolute lie. And you can just see the actions. The actions speak louder than words. We need to keep you safe, but what does that mean? Keeping me safe from Muhammad Ali and his anti-war rhetoric? Is that what it means? Is that you can discredit anyone? I mean, even the late John F. Kennedy was being targeted by the NSA. And we know the tactic. It's been leaked. The NSA tracks people's porn habits and tracks what you look at. And it's really kind of odd that is the tactic, considering, and I guess it's not odd, it's actually very genius and probably strikes home when J. Edgar Hoover, a man who was a cross-dresser was able to use this this tactic because he himself understood that the indiscretions of politicians late at night when they're away from their wives was a great tactic to getting people into compromising positions and a way to blackmail them. This is, all justified to fight communists and find evil commies inside of the government. And I'll be the first to say that McCarthy was right. There were a lot of them. But you can't eliminate ideas. And that's what the government tried to do. Eliminating competition by communism or basically staging false flag attacks and coup d'etats and killing hundreds of thousands of people in the 20th century to maintain a democracy, a world that's safe for democracy. Now, the only thing that you could say for that, I'll play devil's advocate for a moment, is that in countries like Europe and others that are U.S. and British-run colonies and other extensions, you can travel pretty safely. You might get touched by the cops, and that's really the worst part of it now, but you have relatively safe travels. You can go to Canada and other places that are part of the New World Order or the Atlanticism, the Atlantic Union, that idea, the Western world, and you can pretty much freely travel and the relative safety. If you go to Caracas, go to Venezuela, not a safe place. You can there's 35 murders a day in certain barrios. I mean, the amount of senseless murder and just carnage that's happening there it's unbelievable. And you can't blame it all on the U.S. This is really just a lot of kids. It's a huge amount of youth, disenfranchised youth in these huge ghettos that run these towns. And it, for lack of central government, for lack of police, become the de facto overlords in certain regions. And you have a lot of places throughout the world that are that way. So the only thing that you can say is that countries that were resistant or that have decided to veer off the path end up in a much worse way. And that's primarily because the U.S. and the Western elite have continually funded and pushed horrible people into positions of power in these countries. Honduras is a perfect example. The crises on the border. It's all about the State Department, congressional Republicans, and Hillary Clinton supporting the oligarchs and really doing the same thing in the Ukraine. So if you see the Honduran crisis, we don't have Russia next door giving SA-17 missiles to them. Not that I think that they are giving those to the separatists in Russia, but maybe, or in Ukraine, but maybe. I mean, I don't put anything past anyone. And to sit here and let this, simmer into a quagmire is a really, I guess, good plan for Vladimir Putin because, time is what the U.S. is against in Ukraine. They are against their own people, and they're fighting their own people. That doesn't really constitute a victory for Putin or the U.S. And so as these things deteriorate, it becomes more and more of the West's responsibility to rebuild. And the worse the crisis gets, the more that will have to be done, ultimately, to scavenge what's left. And the IMF's already trying to restructure loans because they can't keep the East under control. So you have a lot of defectors. I think that's the sad, true tragedy that's happening there is that if the U.S. doesn't finish the job, then you are just going to have this huge power shift and more eccentric and people hell-bent on ethnic cleansing and killing Russian favorable or Russian-speaking ethnic Russian people will be the result. And so that's the true tragedy. One of the things that has happened that I don't think too many people are catching on, and we'll just use this to wrap up the show. Air Force is now launching GSSAP satellites to spy on other satellites. So war, we've talked about economic war, we've talked about ground invasion and what's happening in the Middle East and Ukraine. The other side of that is the vantage point, the viewpoint. One of the problems the U.S. and the Europeans are having is that the Russians have satellites. They have real information that is, contradicting what the U.S. is saying. Now, the U.S. knows that they can get away with saying things and repeating them for quite a while. Just keep saying the same thing. Well, we have reason to believe. We have a source that says. We have reasonable suspicion. It only begs the question as to why the Russians wouldn't have done it. They can put it in that context. They can put the burden of proof on classified information that you'll never see, and it won't matter by the time they declassify it 15 years from now. It would just be one more admission of something, a little shenanigan that the U.S. government did way back in 2014. So the long short of it is that you have to blind satellites. Space war. It's very important. So now we have, under the guise of protecting satellites, just like under the guise of protecting the internet, that they're going to have forward aggressive military weaponry that they will use from time to time to blow up satellites. And the Geosynchronous Space Situational Awareness Program is launching these. I wouldn't be surprised if we have new weapon systems being launched. Speaking of which, the long question moon bases have made it back into the headlines. This came out of CNN. When you think about, are there really wars happening in space? This begs some really interesting questions as well. 1960s, secret plans for U.S. moon base. After a thorough justification of the scientific, political, and military need for the base, the proposal, 2 documents and more than 400 typewritten pages calculated out the details of what could be done on the outpost and what it would take to make it reality. Now, some of you out there that probably think the moon landings were completely a hoax, I think you're justified in that assessment, but in thinking that this would compound I believe that they were there. I just don't believe that what we saw was necessarily real. But that's another story. But the fact that there were actually, a huge plan proposal, that the need was there, and this could have happened or may have happened is pretty interesting in and of itself. It offered graphs and mathematical formulas, considerations for low gravity and magnetic fields, lack of water and air, ballistic dynamics on the moon surface, design drawings of spacecraft, lunar bulldozers, modular moon cabinets, and space units. It contained photos of the moon with desirable spots for a colony mapped out on them. Project Horizon would start out with 10 to 20 crew members on a mission to build somewhat self-sustaining colony capable of producing its own oxygen and water. And it goes on, and they get more into the details there, but just one of those quacky things that, if you mentioned the government wanted to build a moon base, I'm sure 20 years ago, or right after the Apollo moon landings, are they scouting out a base? Be like, are you a freaking conspiratard? People probably were not really receptive to that, but the government thought about it. They definitely put a plan in motion. So it's kind of interesting. The things that were once conspiracy or once seemed wacky and woo-woo are becoming declassified. And we're finding out more and more of those. I mean, it only stands to reason that they would want to weaponize space. And where they're spending those trillions of dollars they can't find at the Pentagon, I'd look up in the sky. I think that there's a lot of things that are happening up there that people are not quite paying attention to, but that's where it's all going. It's all going up in smoke. Guys, thank you, and gals, for being part of this 26th of July 2014 edition of Blacklisted News Radio. Follow me on Twitter. BLN Radio is the handle. And we'll be back next Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time for another live edition of Blacklisted News Radio. Until then, have a great week. Take care and be safe.